Hi guys, a Ford motor car with a French diesel engine under the hood. Whatever next? Right then, the Peugeot 2litre HDI engine. Now this engine is used in many different vehicles, and I couldn't tell you all the different vehicles that you'll find this engine in. So I'm going to stick to the two vehicles I do know it's in. The first of which is the Mark IV Ford Mondeo. The second vehicle is a Peugeot Expert van. Now the year ranges for these two vehicles will be between 2007 and 2014. So if your vehicle falls between those year ranges, then carry on watching this video if you want to change your cam belt. Now the engine I'm going to use to show you this cam belt replacement is out of the vehicle. So it's a lot easier for me to show you how it's done, but I will try to explain it as if the engine were in a vehicle. So I shall crack on. Okay. Just a few things to note here. The engine mount, whether it be on the Mondeo or the Expert van, you do not have to touch. So just leave it well alone. The coolant bottle on the Expert van, just unbolt it and move it to one side, but don't disconnect the hoses. However, we will have to remove the inner wheel arch liner on the Mondeo and the Expert van to gain proper access to underneath the wheel arch. This will be the view of your timing belt on the Mondeo and the Expert van from underneath the wheel arch. And as you can see, we will be removing the timing belt from underneath the wheel arch. These tools to time the engine up are just an ordinary bolt you can find lying around anywhere. And the bar is just a bent piece of bonnet rod to time the crankshaft. This is it, our 2litre HDI diesel engine. The first thing we need to do is remove that top cover. Now, from underneath the bonnet, there are 3 little 10mm screws which you will whiz out. They're all easily accessible, and there's a few fuel pipes and clips you can just unclip and move to one side. From underneath the wheel arch, there's a little 10mm nut. If you undo that, get that out of the way. Now all that's left is to remove that top cover, and you will remove that from underneath the bonnet, and that will reveal our camshaft sprocket. Now this bolt I'm showing you is that ordinary bolt we're going to use to time up our camshaft sprocket. Now if you have an air gun, it's a lot easier to remove that crankshaft pulley bolt. If you don't have an air gun, you might well have to take the starter motor out and fit the flywheel locking tool, but you'll have to go out and buy that. Now from underneath the wheel arch, there are a further 3 little 10mm screws. They'll all have to come off, and once they're out, that little gold ring is our crankshaft position sensor reluctor disc. If you jiggle the bottom cover about, it will pull the disc forward, and then you can jiggle the disc off like so. Now we can remove our bottom cover, and that will expose our entire cam belt. Note the woodruff key is dead centre with our sprocket. Okay, now all you need to do is pop your crankshaft pulley back on, put the bolt in and nip it up. Don't tighten it fully, we're only nipping the bolt up for the time being. Now with a 22mm spanner, we're going to turn the crankshaft clockwise. And now here our piece of bonnet rod, we're going to insert this into the back of the engine in that little hole just below where the starter motor would sit. And if we had a flywheel,
on the back of this engine, which we don't, but if we did, there is a hole in the flywheel. So when we turn our crankshaft pulley, our bar will go into the back of the flywheel and lock the crankshaft into position. And our camshaft sprocket, you will see the holes will line up about 4 o'clock position. That's where we insert our bolt. If it doesn't push fully home, don't worry, just leave it for the time being. We'll sort that out in a minute. And now we need to take our crankshaft pulley bolt back out again and remove our crankshaft pulley once again. Okay, now our timing pins are both in position. Using a 13mm spanner, we can loosen our tensioner nut and you'll see it de-adjusting. And now our timing belt should be nice and loose. So all you have to do from underneath the wheel arch is grab your timing belt and jiggle it around until it eventually comes off. And once it's off, you can pull the timing belt out from underneath the wheel arch. And now just remove your tensioner. Now this 16mm bolt, if you undo that, that's holding like an idler pulley. So just unscrew that and the whole pulley will just drop out from the bottom of that bracket like so. Now, if you put a 16mm spanner on our camshaft sprocket and just jiggle the sprocket around, that will allow our bolt to fully locate. And as you can see, our camshaft sprocket is now fully locked in position. At this point, you would unbolt your water pump. I think it's 5 11mm bolts. Just replace the water pump and put a brand new one in its place. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is fit our new tensioner. That little pin is holding it fully retracted, which will allow us to fit the belt nice and easily. The little cutout in the tensioner will line up with a dowel on the engine, so you can't really fit the tensioner wrong. So we'll slide that tensioner onto the stud and line it up with the dowel, as you can see. Now we can put the nut on the end of our tensioner, but don't tighten it up, just leave it just a tiny little bit loose. Our idler pulley, all we're going to do with this is slide that back up into our engine bracket, and we can whiz that with our fingers, but we can actually tighten this one up fully now with our 16mm spanner. Wonderful. Make sure it spins. Now our crankshaft sprocket, it's in the middle, our woodruff key. If you move that sprocket to the left and butt the woodruff key up just like so, we'll come back to that bit in a minute. Now we're going to fit our timing belt now. So from underneath the bonnet, you're going to slide the timing belt down from the top and fit it onto our camshaft sprocket first. Believe me, it's a lot easier this way. So fit that belt around your camshaft sprocket and guide it down between your idler and tensioner pulleys. And now, from underneath the wheel arch, we can now take the belt and slide it onto our water pump and onto our crankshaft sprocket. Now you see our woodruff key is butted up to the right hand side of our crankshaft sprocket. That's just where we want it. So all we do now is pull that pin out of our tensioner, and that takes up the slack in the belt. And you see it's pulled our sprocket around to more or less the centre, and that is where we want it. Okay, now with our tensioner, there's a pointer and a cutout, and the pointer has to line up with the cutout. So we'll take our Allen tool and turn our tensioner slowly anti-clockwise until the pointer lines up with the cutout. As you can see, when you get to that point, you can now take your 13mm spanner and tighten your tensioner down fully. And once that tensioner is tight, that's it. Your timing belt is now tightened. Just make sure the pointer is still definitely in the centre of our cutout. And you can see our woodruff key is now dead centre of our crankshaft sprocket. You can remove your crankshaft timing pin. If the camshaft timing pin doesn't come out, just leave it and I'll come back to that. Stick your bottom cover on, bolt it up, fit your crankshaft reluctor disc, and now you can pop your crankshaft sprocket back on. Pulley, should I say. You'll notice it will slop about a bit. If you just get it somewhere in the centre, put a bit of Loctite on your bolt, and now you can nip the crankshaft pulley bolt back up. We're not tightening it fully at the minute, just nip it up a little bit. At this point you can just jiggle the crankshaft pulley and pull your camshaft locking bolt out. Now we can whack our crankshaft pulley bolt up fully. Now we're going to turn the engine over 2 revolutions. Okay. Once you've turned your engine over 2 revolutions, put your flywheel locking tool back in and your camshaft locking pin back in. They should both line up perfectly. Okay, now you can remove both your timing pins, check your belt tension, everything looks fine, check your pointer is lined up with your cutout in your tensioner. And that's it, job done. Pop your top cover back on from underneath the bonnet. You can bolt that up, and that's it, our timing belt has been replaced. Phew. That's it then. I hope you learned something. And if I didn't mention it earlier, the service life on that belt is 125,000 miles. So, this is me, Alan, signing out. Till the next time. Adios.